Now we have quite a few cards that have been going through the board. And we already know how we get the raw data for the statistics by just clicking on this icon down here. And then we have the data on the left-hand side. So we can just copy it from there. But now the question is, what are we going to do with it? Let's start with the easiest diagram, the lead time distribution diagram. So we just start from scratch and we just open a Google spreadsheet and copy the data into the sheet. To get a proper formatting, we have to choose some settings down there. We can split the columns by semicolon in this case. And now we have a proper formatted table. Now we have the raw data. And now we need to get into making a statistic out of it. So we will start with a new sheet and a new query. We will actually use a real query that is working in the Google spreadsheets. And there's an actual query command. You first state the data source, which will be our original data. And then we have the query that we are using. In our case, it will be a select statement. It will be select the ID, and the ID is in column A. So we will have the select A. And the other thing that we want is we want the timestamps. And especially we want to have the difference between the first and the last timestamp, so we get the lead time. And we use the maximum from column F minus the minimum from F, so we have the difference. We will group this by the ID, so we will get it for each single item. And we just order it for convenience, so we have it in a proper order. Just fix a small error. And then we will have the data. We have some unnecessary data in there. We can remove that by adding a condition. So only where the ID field is not empty, we will choose those items. And the timestamp is now in milliseconds. That's not easy to read, so we will change it and calculate it into days. So we divide it by 24 hours, by 60 minutes, by 60 seconds, by 1,000 milliseconds. And then we have the proper Google time format, which is in days. And then we can format this one into a duration format, and then we can have a readable format. So now we almost have everything that we need. So the only thing that we need is the proper lead time histogram. And we will do this in a separate sheet again. We will start from 0 here, and this is actually the time 0. We want to have control over a bucket size, so we will create a variable bucket size. We can even create a name for this variable, so you can name the field. Our bucket size will be 30 seconds because we quickly put the cards over the board, so 30 seconds could be a good size. And so the next field will be the previous one plus our step size, bucket size. So just add one for 10 minutes exactly. Now we have all the buckets available. But now we need to actually count how many items do we have for each of those buckets. So here we just go and do a simple count. In our case, we use the count ifs, which allows us to use multiple conditions. So we just count those items that are actually in those buckets, and we use it from the data that we have created in the sheet previously, and we could just select it from that data set. But so we can use it in a general way, we will just go onto the column data, which makes more sense, so it doesn't matter how many items are in the previous sheet. And then we add our condition, and in this case is that it needs to be greater or equal than our current start of the bucket size, and it must be smaller than the next bucket size step. And that comes from the same data source. Now we have those items and we copy those. The last one has one specialty. We remove the upper boundary so that everything that is bigger than this bucket will be collected in the last one. And now we have all the data that we need to create the diagram. That's quite simple in Google Sheets. We just insert a chart. We get a chart, and then we can choose a different chart type. In our case, a proper one would be a column chart. Down there is the standard column chart, so that's usually what we use. And now we already have the lead time distribution diagram. Completely done from the Miro board until we have a chart in the sheet. In this case, we can change our bucket size, for example, to 15 seconds or 10 seconds. Then we see a lot of those end up in the last bucket. Or we can just put it within our bucket, then everything would be in the first bucket, which would make no sense, has no information that we need in this case. So 30 seconds was kind of a good bucket size in the beginning. And now with only 4 formulas, we have the complete lead time distribution created.